The Office of the Secretary of Defense is aiming for a fall release of its force structure assessment for the Navy. Defense Secretary Mark Esper says it's because the Navy's version of the force structure assessment didn't offer a, quote, credible pathway to a 355-ship fleet. Bryan Clark is Senior Fellow at the Hudson Institute, former Special Assistant to the Chief of Naval Operations, and former Director of the CNO's Commanders Action Group. Bryan, thanks for joining me today. Give me the history of this. How did we get to where we are? What did the Navy do or not do that OSD liked or didn't like?
Well, thank you for having me on today, Francis. What apparently was the issue was the Navy's proposal initially did not have a sustainable plan to be able to afford the fleet over the long term. The cost to buy the ships is going to be higher than the Defense Department was likely to get, or the Navy was likely to get, and also the cost to sustain them over time was likely to exceed what's available in the operation and support accounts. So first of all was that financial feasibility. And I think also operationally, the SecDef was concerned that the Navy's proposal didn't match up with the operational concepts that were being developed by the Navy and by the Office of the Secretary of Defense and Joint Staff for future warfighting. So these concepts were going to require a fleet that was much more distributed, much more rebalanced to smaller platforms than the planned fleet. So I think those were the two main issues that the SecDef probably found to be problematic with the Navy's initial proposal.
The potential challenge that we have, of course, Bryan, is that the force structure assessment that's coming out will probably be written to the National Defense Strategy that's now 2, maybe 3 years old itself. And there's a shorter time until we expect to see the next NDS than there has been since the last one came out. At what point do we get out of the cycle of writing to the last NDS and writing to the next one?
That's a great question. So I think one of the benefits that we're going to have in terms of coming to the new administration, whether it's the current Trump administration or it's a new Biden administration, I think a lot of the thinking in terms of national security is going to be the same. So a lot of the main elements of the existing national defense strategy will probably persist into a new one. There's going to be, obviously adjustments at the edges, but the main elements of a focus on deterrence, a focus on using distributed forces and using multi-domain operations to a greater degree. Those are likely to persist because those are kind of key core elements of the concepts that the services are developing that would inform a strategy that would come out of a new administration. So I think that there's probably a benefit just because there's a continuity in terms of the thinking among the national security community about the best ways to deter aggression by China or Russia or even smaller players like Iran or North Korea.
Last time you were on the program, Bryan, at the very end of the conversation, we touched on the fact that you have some insight into this. What can you tell me about what anybody's looking at, whether it's what the Navy's already put out or what OSD could potentially do?
Well, I think, like I said before, we're likely to see a final result come out of this project in the fall. So within the next month or month and a half. We'll see a product come out of this, whether it's coming out of the Secretary of Defense's office, but more likely it'll come out of the Navy in terms of their actual force structure assessment and force structure requirements. They also are going to have to provide a shipbuilding plan to the Congress because they're going to potentially hold up operation and support funds for the Navy if they don't receive that shipbuilding plan within the new fiscal year. So I think we're going to see that in the next month and a half or so. I think it's likely to show a fleet that is rebalanced towards smaller platforms. So the Marine Corps has talked about this new light amphibious warship. The Navy has talked about a large unmanned surface vessel that'll probably be manned initially. So that's a smaller platform than you see today with the frigates and destroyers that the Navy's building. So this rebalancing towards a fleet that's got a more diversity of platforms, a larger number of small platforms, will be a key element of that future force design. I think you're going to see in terms of carriers probably a similar number as today, maybe a slightly smaller number. Submarines will probably be similar to the current requirement. But I think the main changes you'll see are going to be in that surface combatant and the amphibious ship categories.
Among the smaller platforms, do you expect to see platforms that are either repurposes or just outright redevelopment of current platforms that already exist, or will we get back into a situation that we had with the LCS a couple of years ago where they had to create something basically from scratch?
Well, that's an area of contention. So I think the Navy, its natural predilection is to pursue a new design platform to achieve the highest level of new capability that's possible. They have a future large surface combatant that's currently in their program that they would like to pursue as a new design. I think, though, that the fiscal constraints are going to force them to think maybe doing something that's more derivative of existing design. So a destroyer that's maybe more like the existing Arleigh Burke destroyers rather than this new cruiser-sized ship they want to pursue. And then on the smaller combatant side, I think we will see a lot of ships that are derivative of existing platforms. The Navy's large unmanned surface vessel, they want to make be very similar to existing offshore support vessels that are used in the oil and gas industry and are used offshore for other purposes. And in the light amphibious warship, there's a lot of existing designs for essentially beachable amphibious ships that drive up onto the shore and unload their Marines. Those designs are out there in foreign navies. So there are existing designs you're likely to pursue for those. I hope that the Navy thinks about doing more derivative designs in the larger ship categories to try to avoid getting into that problem that we've seen before, where we start a new design and it becomes unaffordable very quickly.
We have about 30 seconds left. Does the fact that the frigate design appears to be a more derivative, more along the lines of a derivative design, give you any indication that we might see a lot more of that, or is it potential that could just be a one-off?
It's encouraging, but I'm still, the way the Navy is still talking about the large surface combatant is a new design ship. I think you're seeing the same thing when it comes to future submarines, where they're looking at a new design ship. So the frigate exercise is encouraging, but I'm hoping that they look at that as an approach they can pursue with these other platforms as well, because I just don't know if there's going to be money to start something new from scratch.
Bryan Clark, thanks as always. Great to see you.
Oh, you're welcome, Francis. Thank you for having me on.